Okay, that makes sense. But anyways, we're starting now. Here's the argument of the year: Windows or Linux. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'll let whoever wants to go first. You can go first. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Which makes sense. I will agree with that, but okay. Well, we're not talking about Mac because we all know Mac is obviously below. Mac can just, you know, I was this gay. Anyways, keep going. Oh, my cat. Sorry. It's the same thing. Even with Windows, like you have to have like OK settings to run OBS Studio, but that's just because of how it works. With everything, you need to have good enough specs to actually run it. I'm using OBS right now, as you can clearly see, but it works for me because of what I have. But going to the graphics thing, most of them do work. Like even newer ones are gonna have issues no matter what you run them on. That's just gonna happen. But here's the thing: a lot of it is because there are differences between Windows and Linux. It's a lot easier to program for Windows, which I will give. But Linux, if you can get it to work, it runs much smoother and it runs faster. It's just that a lot of people aren't trained on how to actually code for Linux because you have to do different commands and different everything, which means you sometimes have to rehaul everything, and that's the same even if you're gonna change it from Mac to, you would also have to change it. So it just depends on like who knows how to do what. A lot of that, there are very few things that cannot ever work on Linux, and they're usually older graphics cards. And like some of the really new ones, they won't work well. But a lot of it is just, yes. But a lot of it, yeah. Which means that, yeah. But the thing is, like even with Windows, there are things that run better on Linux, like Kdenlive. Live. But that's getting off topic. The graphics cards, it's just that there people don't make it for Linux in mind, so people actually have to do work to get to work on Linux because they don't. Most people like Nvidia, they think second about Linux because not as many people use it because more people use Windows because it's a lot easier to buy a Windows machine than it is to download Linux or to buy a Linux computer because you have to do it from specific places. It just depends. I will give you. It just depends on what you're talking about and like what you're doing to install Windows. And with Linux, you can do the same thing with Linux because I've done that before too. But there obviously there's always going to be something that screws up, so that's not very safe option. In Linux, here's the difference. It is a lot harder to technically install Linux. People will be more confused because it gives you more options. It lets you choose what you want on certain distros. It just depends on what you get. Linux is a lot more variety, and yeah, with Linux, it just depends on what you're doing. Because I will admit, installing Gentoo is a lot harder than like Ubuntu. With it, it just depends, honestly, because there's a lot of variation. A lot of people will choose the easier versions. They have slightly less um, customizability, but the harder ones are a lot harder to install, obviously. And even with Windows, you can't do nearly as much with it. It tells you, hey, what do you want your password to be? And it's like, that's it. And it tells you straight up when you install Windows 10 at least. You can tell, like, if you want location turned on or off. But Linux, oh, hold up. Okay, sorry about that. My dad was calling me. Wait, what was I saying? I actually forgot. Customizability and things like that. To me, I prefer it just because, like, with Ubuntu, there are hundreds of different desktops that you can choose from. You can change your icons, you can change what you have, how things work. With Windows, it's a lot harder to do that. And you're limited to, do you want your taskbar on the left, right, top, or bottom, or the color of it? With here, you change anything you want. Windows or Mac, yeah, you can do that. Yeah. And that happens with anything. Like if you, it just depends on where you download it. That's more of just a personal problem. If you do that, that's more of like you not. It's just basically you basically just screwing up and getting a virus from downloading something from a sketchy website. Yeah. I mean, sure, it helps. You don't need it on you don't really need it on Windows either if you're just careful and know what you're doing. But the thing with Linux, it's a lot harder to write a successful virus for Linux. I will admit most of the viruses that Linux has had were very bad, but it's a lot less because of the way that Linux is set up. It's a lot harder if you're on the home to get to the root, basically to get the root password and destroy things, unlike it is in Windows. And sure, that's probably going to change sometime, and I know that even Windows has a Linux subsystem now, which is really cool. But for me, it's like it doesn't really matter if you have a Linux subsystem. I don't know why that exists. Except for maybe running servers or something a little bit nicer. Okay. Yeah. Because on most things Python comes pre-installed if you're not doing like a basic base upgrade. But there are some things that Windows has but we don't, which is mainly DirectX. We don't have that. We have OpenGL. DirectX is a lot more used, so it's not that it's better. It's about the same, but in my opinion, it's been more fixed basically because more people use it and more people are gonna find more bugs. Yeah, because more people use Windows. Yeah. No, you really can't because they're totally different systems, and they are made differently. Because you look at a Windows system, there are 7 parts. We have similar things too, SH and app images. We have similar things, just not many people use them. Yeah. You gotta really try. And at that point, you know what you're doing, so that's on you. But with Windows, okay, in Linux, it's a lot harder to code viruses and hacks for it. Take that as you will, but it just depends. A lot of people, if you can make a hack for Linux, you are definitely in demand because a lot of servers use Linux and some places even use BSD apparently, which is even more secure, which is even more of a pain to set up. Windows is used, but not that much. Like if you're a small website, it's okay to use Windows, but if you're like Microsoft, you're gonna use Linux to host your servers. I made it. I mean, Windows is okay if you're like running a server and you get the server version. It's okay, but it's not the best you can be doing. Mac is probably the worst. The Mac OS, not the MacBook, the OS itself. The OS itself is okay. It's just the things that it runs on. And speaking of terrible, that's not what I'm trying to say. English is just leaving me. Linux is it's almost always a lighter version of Windows. It's like always lighter than Windows, unless you get like a really big ISO version of it, or like a really small Windows. Reason because you're lagging. Oh yeah, I can hear you. Does that work? DMGs, yeah. They use DMGs. We use .deb if you're using Ubuntu or Debian. And then there's something else. And then Fedora and OpenSUSE, it's RPM. Oh, there's a tar.xz too. PKG. .pkg. That's BSD, but we also have tar.xyz or whatever, tar dot something. I will admit, if you're getting used to it from Windows, it's going to be a lot harder. But once you get used to doing that, you'll find that you have a lot more control about your updates. Because Windows, it doesn't tell you what it's updating. It doesn't matter, apparently. Linux, it tells you everything they're updating. You can opt out of anything. I wouldn't recommend opting out of like security updates, but do what you wish. Yeah, shall admit, the one bad thing with Linux is that with um, which as you said earlier, Windows just has a lot more things that run natively on it, and some of that is because people don't know how to program for Linux because they're not used to programming with different things. And I will admit that it is a lot harder to do that with Linux, but it works just as well, and it usually runs like a little bit faster. Sometimes it'll screw up, yes, and that always happens. Linux is not perfect. Now there's Windows and now there's Mac. But the main reason there is no like Linux version of a lot of things is because one, they don't know how to code for it, or two, they're too lazy. And C and what? What's CMB? Oh, command prompt window. The command prompt window is something to issue commands. It's not a full-on coding language. Python is a full-on coding language used on every single system. You can use it on every system, including BSD. Although it's a little bit buggy, but you can still use it. Python is used for coding too, like legit. You could. It's not CMD. It's called batch. Or yeah, batch. That's what it's called. But CMD itself is just a command prompt, and it just does commands. You cannot technically code with it. Batch is different though. It's just a heck of a lot harder. You don't usually run full on programs. It's just like a little thing to make sure something starts correctly. Same thing with Python. It does that too. And it does that a lot if you're like downloading from like source and stuff, which is a pain on it in and of itself. But you could do the same thing with Windows when it's just as much of a pain. Okay. What do you mean? We don't talk about those. We don't talk about them. No, they don't exist. The tablets are good, but the phones they don't exist. They're trash. They're actual trash. I had one and I hated it. They're trash. Because you don't have nearly as many apps on it, and then a lot of it just doesn't work well, and it's a lot harder to navigate. Well, Android and iOS, but like we're gonna keep them together. They're kind of the same. Yeah. Imagine having a $1,000 um, iPhone 10 or 10s or whatever they have now, but having still wired earbuds. Huh. Weak. Like, okay, the one good thing about Windows phones is that they are cheap as heck. So if you really need like a quick phone and you don't really care about apps and stuff, it's okay for them. It works for that. Anything else doesn't exist. Heck, a Nokia is better just because it can actually last a fall. Yeah. Yes, the strongest phone that exists. Yeah, the strongest phone that's ever existed that can literally withstand a 380 bullet. I think I've seen it withstand up to like a 9 millimeter too. Was one of the two. I was thinking, it's like Snake and stuff. Yeah, yeah, which makes sense. Microsoft, yeah, yeah. But back onto the topic we were legitimately talking about earlier. Cortana's trash. I've never used it. Okay, if I remember correctly, I think like Farron or something like that has something similar, but it was actually good. And again, most of us don't really need it because we know where our stuff is. That's just more of a personal thing. I never use it. You may like Cortana. That's just a personal thing. Okay. We have a lot in common. We have a lot. Like seriously. Like I've gotten an Opera GX to work on Linux, but that's once natively Windows. We have Firefox, Chrome, Brave, something else. There's a lot. I think the normal Opera 2 is also a Linux one. Hey, at least our default browser is actually good. Like you just agree, because it's true. Because Edge is terrible. Yeah, Firefox. There's like one that's like Chrome or Brave, one of the two, but it's basically Firefox. Yeah, because thing is, Edge is trash. I'm sorry, but it's terrible. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's weird. The Canary builds have some cool things though. Oh, I haven't seen that, but I'll check it out later. Okay, I'll send you the video after I'm done, though, so you can post it too. If I can send it to you, I'll send you my video, then you can post it too. But basically, I personally prefer Linux just because one, I've destroyed USBs like physically just from ripping them out all the time. And that's just my personal thing. That's me being an idiot. Just because I kept ripping them out, distro hopping, installing multiple versions of everything. I think I've installed every single major one except for Gentoo. I've even tried MX, which was nice. Also, one good thing, bad thing about Linux is that you're either constantly hopping or you stick to one and hate it. With Windows, it's like you either go to Windows 7, 8, or 10. It's like, which terrible operating system do you want? It's not terrible, but yeah. Three that are actually useful, that you can actually use now. You can you can technically still use XP, it just doesn't work well. Vista's older. Vista, it, I wouldn't use it. Like anything from like XP and before, don't use it if you can. Like it's the same thing with Linux too. We have a lot more big updates though, and just a lot more updates to keep it secure. That's how we do it. And usually it'll just pop up, hey, there's a new update. You want an update? It's like, if I don't want an update, it's like, nah, fam. Yeah. Have you heard of Pine or Pine 60? No, I'm trying to remember what that company was called. System 76. That's what it was. Yeah, they're starting to make laptops, and I think like some places are selling them too. But you are right. Just because it's like most places have a thing with Windows, because they can get their, because they don't care about making things for Linux. Not that they don't care, it's that they pay more attention to Windows because that's where most of the money is. people aren't going to buy a Linux one if they've never used it before, which is mainly it's not Linux's fault or Windows' fault. It's the people's fault because we don't want to try things new, and I don't blame them honestly. I don't blame them, but still, true. But yeah, yeah, it's the same thing with Linux. You learn how to do different things. You learn how to make your own things, and then you have to like. First time I installed Steam on Debian. Never install Debian, by the way. If you actually want to use it for like gaming, don't install it. It is a pain in the ass to get it to work. Okay, SteamOS is just trash. I've never gotten it to work. That's the only one that does not work. I'm not kidding. I've gotten more. With FreeBSD I can never get the internet to work. At least I could actually like boot with it. Yeah, they boot totally differently. That's one thing. So usually Linux, depending on a lot of settings and everything else, usually boots a little bit faster. It just depends on a lot of things. But for me, Linux is always faster for me. And like I just prefer like, if, oh you're lagging. You good now? Okay. Yeah. Well, that's only on laptops because I have a PC. It doesn't do that, but that's just like the laptop in general. Because they always, yeah, yeah, yeah. And with with Linux, they usually, depending on what you have, sometimes they'll show you like a logo of your distro, but if you don't, it'll show you everything that it's starting. So if something screws up, you'll know much easier instead of just getting a blue screen or whatever. The thing is, I've never had that issue. I've had an issue with my monitor because my HDMI cable hates me. But that's HDMI cable. It hates me. The thing is, once you first install Linux, it's all open source. You can screw with it as much as you want, and like if you change it enough, you can like say that it's your own distro. There's so many, and you can change it so much. With Windows, it's always gonna be Windows. And Windows is like and and the color of it. That's all you can change. Cool. But you know what's funny? In older versions of Windows, you could entirely change the taskbar. You could change it to like a dragon or something. Now you're not allowed to do that because you will get arrested. Or like you're supposed to get arrested, but nobody actually ever does. Huh? Like you're not like okay, you're not supposed to change anything super sudden like outside of what they give you. You're not supposed to change it. You're not supposed to like change the source code or anything. You're not supposed to do that. It's kind of like a gray area, but some people could get in trouble for it, but nobody ever does. It doesn't matter. I mean, And you can physically do it if you really try. It's just very hard now. Like with Linux, I could if I wanted to. I just don't have the patience to like create my own everything. I hate making animations, so I'm not doing that. But you could if you wanted to. I mean, yeah, that's what everybody does. That's what everybody does. But anyways, awesome W no, awesome WM, awesome is a window maker that I've used. This is what I had to do. This is like what I wanted to do because of how it was made, because of like everything. Because it wasn't the first desktop that I had. The menu was all weird and didn't show all the applications. So here's what I did. I made my own freaking menu. I just looked in the source code until I figured it out. And that was one of the best things because you can do that. And if you can manage to do that, it makes you feel amazing when you do it. And I love it. How about we don't do that? How about we just like not talk about Mac because they don't exist? The only thing they're good for is making Apple things, and that's only because it's like directly linked to it. There's only okay, back to applications. There's only one thing that I know that runs natively on Linux that doesn't work super well on Windows, and that's KDN Live. It's a video editing software that I use. I've used it on Windows and it crashes a lot because FFmpeg doesn't work well on Windows. I wouldn't know because I've used them on both and I really don't notice anything. I do notice that if I have the same amount of stuff open on Windows and Linux, like the Linux runs better just because it's lighter weight. And it handles it differently. It handles the CPU differently so that it prioritizes things differently than Windows does, so it runs a little bit smoother. How about we just like stop right there? That's Inception levels. This is not Inception. Did you just lag out again? Oh, I thought you lagged out again. You were laughing. If that's all you have, it's a 30-minute video. I'm probably not going to edit it that much though, because I don't like editing. And I was editing a web series earlier, or like yesterday, and I really don't want to edit again because of the pain. My personal channel? I have 30 subs now. It's not doing too well in views though. I had 28. I went up 2 like a month. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm probably gonna sign off because I don't have much else to talk about. I mean, I'm still be in the call, but I'm gonna stop recording.